Good evening, everybody. Good to see you. Good to see you. Hope you're all doing well. Being 1 Thessalonians tonight and studying out of the end of chapter 2 and the beginning of chapter 3. See how far we get with everything tonight. As always, your questions and comments are encouraged. And it always makes class better when people have their question. Who has our opening prayer tonight? Peter, if you would, go ahead and lead us to get started. And thank you very much. Y'all come on in. 1 Thessalonians 2, we're going to be starting at about verse 17. 2:17. I want to focus initially on Paul's great love that he had for the brethren in Thessalonica. It was not uncommon when Paul writes his letters, whether it's to Corinth or to Ephesus or Colossae, wherever, that he would comment on just how much he loved the people that he was writing to. And I don't think these were just empty words. I think he really meant them. That he had a deep and profound love for the brethren there, many of whom he was the initial teacher of. In chapter 2 at verse 17, he makes this observation: since we were torn away from you, brothers, for a short time, in person, not in heart, we endeavored the more eagerly and with great desire to see you face to face. Acts 17 records the fact that he was there and there was this great uproar. And it was the brethren who insisted that he leave. And he left, one, because the chaos and the disruption, no doubt, was impacting his work, but also because it was putting some of the brethren at risk of conflict with the government, and in particular with the Jews and with Rome. And so Paul departed. We'll have a little bit more to say about that toward the end of the class. Observe here that while he was torn away from them, it was only a physical thing. It did not affect his feelings for them. He loved them all the more. Many years ago, when I was doing short-term work in Russia, those who were kind of our American organizers always reminded us that we needed to be ready at any moment to be thrown out of the country. Now, there never came a time when we were all thrown out at once, but there were occasions when brethren were refused entry. Brother Charlie Body, who is the great gospel preacher and preached up in the Memphis area for many years and then was down in Central Florida, Charlie would go on a regular basis to Syktyvkar. And he showed up one day, and you get off of the airplane and you come down to passport control, where you show them your passport and your visa, and then they let you in and take whatever customs you have to pay, and then you're allowed to get your luggage and leave. When Charlie came in, they looked at his passport, put it into their computer, and told him, "You can't stay." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You have been banned from coming into the country." And so the way it worked is you spent the night in the airport waiting for the next flight back to America. And that happened to a number of our people over there. We found out later that our key Russian contact was actually an agent of the Federal Security Services, the group that came after the KGB. And we got to thinking about it. It was interesting that when we arrived, he always kept our passports for us and kept us safe. So our passports, nothing would happen to them. The thing is, you don't know, particularly when you're going to a country you've not been to before, you're not really sure if there might be problems that would cause you to be forced out. Well, that's exactly what happened here to the Apostle Paul. He would have stayed much longer, I'm sure. I mean, that's a very reasonable conclusion, but he couldn't because of the way some of the people there received him and fought strongly against him. But his departure was only physical. We endeavor the more eagerly with great desire to see you face to face. We have heard it said, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And that's usually said in connection with a romantic relationship. But for Paul, being separated from these brethren is very difficult on him. He wanted to get back and see them. That was his goal, but he wasn't able to do that. But I want you to note just how deep a love he had for these brethren that he only knew for a short period of time. Now, in the next verse, he says something we want to explore a little bit. Because we wanted to come to you, I, Paul, again and again, but Satan hindered us. Satan hindered us. Now, we think sometimes that Satan is merely some kind of a impersonal force. Job would probably have something to say about that because he was definitely singled out by Satan. It is the case that Satan today has certain abilities, namely the ability to influence, or we might say the ability to tempt, but he doesn't actually have the ability to stop us in our tracks. Here is a verse that every Christian ought to memorize. And if you don't memorize it, you ought to at least mark it in your Bibles. No temptation has overtaken you, says Paul, that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. Now, let that sink in for a moment. First of all, there is no temptation that is not common to man. Sometimes in our temptation, we reason within ourselves, well, nobody understands. Nobody's been in this circumstance. Nobody's had to deal with this. And that's just not true. Now, it may be the case that not everybody has had to deal with the same problem you're dealing with, but somebody has. It is not a unique temptation. I would argue there are no unique temptations. Satan has a limited arsenal, and he tries them all, and when they fail, he flees from us. But all temptation is common. Number two, God is faithful. We know that. And he will not let you be tempted above your ability. Now, here's another thing that we say sometimes. Well, I just couldn't help myself. I just couldn't help it. Here was the situation, boom, boom, boom. I just couldn't say no. I talked to someone today, and they were telling me they'd had problems in the past with alcohol. And the business that they were in required attendance at this reception. And they said, I knew that they were going to be serving alcohol. He said, in fact, they had actually been promoting this fancy vodka drink. So he said, I knew when I went that it was going to be a challenge. But before I went in the door, and apparently this is something they teach you in 12-step programs, he said, I did my inventory. That is, they go through where they are at that moment in time and they identify, okay, am I weak to this for this reason or that reason? Is it safe for me to go in? He said, I decided that I was strong and I was doing well, and I went in, said my hellos, and left. Never touched it. Well, great. But even that temptation, as powerful as it is, in those who suffer from various addictions, can be rejected with the help and with the power of God. Well, how does God help with that? Well, he tells you in the next phrase. With the temptation, he will provide the way of escape. I love to talk about Joseph and Potiphar's wife. As you know from the Old Testament story, Potiphar's wife waited until everyone was out of the house. It was just her and Joseph. Joseph's presence there was a great thing. It was a promotion. It had gotten him away from whatever slavery he might have found himself. He's now in the main house. And Potiphar's wife begins to flirt with him. And she begins to come on to him. And she says, come and lie with me. Which, of course, is a euphemism for engaging in sexual activity. Now, I can think of a lot of ways people would analyze that if they were in Joseph's shape. Okay? For example, well, she's here all the time, Potiphar's not. And it could really make my life easy if I had this relationship with her. And it doesn't really mean anything to me. And so I'm going to go ahead and do it. We'll call it a little nice perk of the job. There are people who reason that way. But even in this situation, there was a way of escape. And in Joseph's case, what was the way of escape? You know the story. The front door. Ran out the door. And throughout the Bible, we find people who reject temptation. I think of David. Now, David didn't always reject temptation, but do you recall before David became king, when Saul was after him? Do you remember that Saul came into the cave where David was hiding to relieve himself? And his men are with him, and they say, here's your chance. You can kill him. He's by himself. Nobody else around. He doesn't know you're here. A lot of people would have reasoned, wow, this is it. God put this in front of me for a reason. I need to jump on it. But no. His way of escape was to just say no and not do it. So sometimes that really is the way of escape. But here's the trick, if you want to call it that. We need to make our decisions before temptation comes. And we need to do all this in our power not to be in the presence of that kind of temptation. We use a word in our world today, well, so-and-so triggered me. Well, most of the time that's just nonsense, but sometimes maybe that's the case. Fine, get away from the trigger. The man that I was talking to you about with the alcohol problem, if you have an alcohol problem, what's one way to deal with that temptation? Stay away from it. Don't go to a bar. Don't go where they're serving it. Keep your distance from it. But again, the key is what? Find your weakness and buttress yourself. Put on the whole armor of God so that we can stand against Satan's influence. He will provide a way of escape that you may endure it. God doesn't endure the temptation for us. It falls on us. And we see in Genesis chapter 3 what happens with a failure to endure temptation. Eve stood there looking at that plant with that beautiful, enticing fruit on it. Smart thing to have done would have been to turn around and walk away from it. She didn't do that. When I was a youth minister, a campus minister, sometimes young people would ask me about these sorts of things and how do I stay out of trouble. I said, just don't put yourself in trouble. That's the answer. You know, we tell our children, tell our young people, there are places you don't need to go. Now, that's the last thing in the world they want to hear, but it's probably the first thing in the world they need to hear. There are places you do not go. And maybe I'm fixing to dance all over somebody's toes with this. I never allowed my children to go to a prom. Never. Was never even an option. I spent my homecoming prom working on lights in the auditorium at the Northport building. My girlfriend was mad. Her mama was mad. They got over it. I got me a new girlfriend. So, well, Brian, that's just kids today. Yeah. There's a reason we have a term in our vocabulary called prom babies. And if you haven't heard that phrase, you ask your kids if they've heard it. Bobby first started teaching school. They were having a dance. I'm not sure where it was. But anyway, they were having a dance. And they said, you teachers have got to chaperone this thing. Bobby said, what in the world are we supposed to do? He said, you get out there among them. And if they get too close to each other, you separate them. Because he said, I ain't having no babies conceived in my gymnasium. Okay, that's all well and good. The problem is you can't always separate the mind. You can get in between the bodies. You can't necessarily get in between the minds. And so after that one event, Bobby went back. She said, I ain't doing another one of these. You tell me what else I can do, but I'm not doing another prom. Because she saw it. And if we think it doesn't happen, we are fooling ourselves. Get out. Don't put yourself in that position. Okay? Any comments? Anybody want to tell me I'm an old fuddy-duddy and stuffed shirt and all that kind of stuff? Feel free to. You wouldn't be the first. Okay. Here's the key. He will not let you be tempted. That means that when you sin, you sin. It's on you, 100%. Don't ever forget that. Because you see, Satan is always restricted by God. There are certain things that God allows. Job 1 and 2 talks about how that Satan hated Job because Job was so righteous. And he tried to taunt God into letting him have at him. And God says, that's fine, but don't touch him. And when Satan took everything he had, except his wife, he goes back to God and God says, well, this time, just don't take his life. And what happened? He did horrible things to Job, but Job didn't bend. God put restraints on Satan because God knew. God knew how far Job could be tempted. But he didn't let him go further than that. God will take care of us if we'll do our part. If we'll stay clear of the trouble, God will do his part always, because God is faithful. Comments? Y'all quiet tonight. Now, going back to that verse, Satan hindered us. Now, here's something else that's very interesting to me about this. Satan hindering Paul did not stop the spread of the gospel. Because if you look back in chapter 17 and 18 of Acts, what you find is that when he left Thessalonica, the people to whom he's writing this letter to, when he left, he went to Berea. What did he find in Berea? Noble Christians who studied the Word, searched the Scriptures daily to see if what he was saying was true. What a fertile field for evangelism. He left Berea and he went to Athens. What happened in Athens? Mars Hill. When he preached the gospel to unbelievers and converted some. And then when he left Athens, where did he go? He went to Corinth and established a congregation of God's people right in the heart of one of the most worldly cities in that era. So Satan may have thought he was shutting him down, but he did not. Not at all. Because when he couldn't go where he wanted to go, he went somewhere else, but he kept doing what he wanted to do. Now, how does that apply to us? Sometimes a door will close. You've heard this before. It's nothing new. When God closes one door, he opens another. What would have happened if Paul had gone back to Thessalonica? We don't know. Don't have any clue. But we know where he did go, and we know what he did while he was there, constantly evangelizing, preaching the gospel, and building up the Christians. So just because we're hindered, just because we get slowed down in the direction we want to go, doesn't always mean that we're completely shut down. Keep going. Just go in a different direction. Comments? Okay. Let's move on then. Timothy, Paul's trusted ambassador, his child in the faith. We know because we have taught before in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy about how much Paul loved and trusted Timothy, how he mentored him into becoming a great gospel preacher. If we drop down in the text and we look down to chapter 3 and about verse 2, we find how much he cared for Timothy and how much he trusted him. He said, I sent Timothy to you to establish and exhort you in your faith, that no one be moved by these afflictions. What afflictions? His afflictions. That's what he's been talking about. His afflictions. And probably also some that they're suffering as well. But we don't want these problems to push you off of your faith in the gospel. You yourselves know that we were destined for this. Destined for what? For all the problems we've had. He said, I told you so. The trouble awaited me. In our lives sometimes, it seems like all of our problems have waited to come upon us at the same time. And we're beat down, and you can't even get your head up. You sit down to pray, and the words won't even come. And you wonder, maybe like David, has God just cast me off? When he pleaded with the Lord, do not take your Holy Spirit from me. That happens to us sometimes. But Paul, because of his two things here, his great love for the Thessalonians and also his great trust in Timothy, sent Timothy to them to prevent their unfaithfulness. To do what? To establish and to exhort you in the faith. When a person becomes a Christian for the first time, they need people working with them to establish them. Help them get their feet on the ground, get their bearings, understand what they can do and how they can do it. And to do that initial training that everybody needs. We had it at Northport for the young people. We had a man, Brother J.B. Ligon. Brother Ligon had a lot of problems in his own life. He had a wife who suffered from terrible mental illness. So much so that I don't know that I ever saw her out of the house. Brother Ligon worked for Woodman of the World, the insurance company, and his job was to train new insurance agents in public speaking and one-on-one communication. Brother Ligon said, I can do that for our young men. And so he created what would have been the closest thing to lads to leaders that we had back then. They called them Timothy classes. And I remember we'd all go and we'd be in there on Sunday night before services, all the guys sitting up here on the front row and Brother Ligon up there, and he was teaching us how to prepare lessons and to prepare sermons and then how to deliver them and all those sorts of things. I never will forget one time he said, we're going to do an experiment tonight called extemporaneous speaking off the cuff. He said, I want you to come up here one at a time and reach into this paper sack and pull out one item. And then I want you to talk for 5 minutes using that item as an illustration. I think I got a pencil. What can you say about a pencil? Well, you can talk about a pencil is strong, but still can be broken. Christian is strong, but can be broken by sin. Pencil has a writing point on it. And that writing point inscribes, just like the Christian is inscribing his life and his name in the Lamb's Book of Life. But sometimes in inscribing our life, we make mistakes, and then we use the other end of the pencil, the eraser, to erase our mistakes, which we do in Christ. That was really kind of cool. I think somebody else got a marshmallow, and he had some really weird stuff in there, okay? Training, teaching. He was establishing in us for service. And then, even Christians who are mature need to be built up and need to be exhorted to do better. Always to do better. That's what Timothy was supposed to do. Because Paul couldn't do it himself. What trust he had in that young man to do for the people what he could not do for them. Any comments? Second thing that he sent Timothy for was because he sent him to learn about your faith for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you and that our labor would be in vain. Nothing would be worse than to go and to start a work somewhere and for it to completely fall apart. Sometimes you hear about that. Churches which are preacher-centric are where the brethren have preacheritis. And when the preacher leaves, either willingly or maybe not willingly, there are those who just quit attending. Because their allegiance wasn't to Jesus, it was to the preacher. Who knows what the problem would have been here? But he wanted to make sure that the work that he did was sustained. Certainly John knows this, that in Kent, that when we hear about work that's going on in Guyana, we are typically encouraged by it. Now, sometimes there have been problems, and it is discouraging. Because you think about the work you put into something, maybe the work you put into some people, and you're discouraged that they have been moved off of the faithful platform, so to speak, and into unfaithfulness. And how wonderful it is to hear that the situation's been corrected. Some years ago, a young man that had been in our school, both his father and then a couple of years later he was in the school and was preaching for one of the congregations down there. He got caught having an affair with a woman. And we were all just really hurt by it. And at that time, Brother Jerry Davidson was in charge of kind of organizing the preachers and everything down there. And so Jerry was prepared to terminate his employment. But the brethren in the church came to Jerry and they said, we want to keep him. He has shown himself to be honest in this matter. He has repented of the matter. He has taken responsibility for what he has done. We love him and we want him to continue as our preacher. In fact, I think that happened in the second congregation as well. That encourages you. It really does. Because not only has he corrected himself, you've got a congregation with a great deal of strength to be able to say something like that. And so that was refreshing, to say the least. Paul wanted to make sure that even though the tempter was restricted, doesn't mean people can't fall, and he wanted to make sure that that had not happened. Now he says this in the next verse, in verse 8. Now we live if you are standing fast in the Lord. Now we live. Paul could go on about his life. He could rejoice. He could be fulfilled. He could live the life God wanted him to have because of the report that came, the true report that came from Timothy. How refreshing it is to hear the brethren are doing well. Many of you have come to the Eastern Shore from a lot of different places, and you know how wonderful it is to hear that people back in your old congregation are living righteously and doing good. Young people who are growing up. Now I can think of a couple right now, two couples, both of whom were involved, some more than others maybe, but now serve the Lord. One is an elder and one is a deacon in a sound congregation. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And it just, whether you had anything to do with it or not, it just makes you rejoice. What comments do you have? Y'all got to talk tonight. I figured y'all be talking. I forgot Burl was out. So my rabbit hole is missing. Sid, what you got?
Well, that's a very tough situation when you run into that.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the things you have to keep in mind, you've got to look at the whole situation and see where it's at, if the people do really, want, like you had your example, wanting to follow, but there again, would he have a attitude or a people that could trust him again, I guess is what I'm coming down to say.
Yeah.
But in a situation like that, we got to remember one thing that you said, if the man asked for forgiveness,
Sure.
God forgave him.
He sure did.
And then, if the people are willing to forgive him, but there again, being in a leadership role like that, how much influence will he have
Well, and here was the situation there, and Jerry was very good about this, and when Roger was in charge, he was good about it, and I think the man who's in charge now will be very good about it. We don't own those congregations. Those are autonomous congregations of the Lord's people. And at the end of the day, that's their call. That's their decision, because they're going to be the ones that will have to live with it. And in their judgment, it was the right thing to do. And looking back, as far as I know, that was the right thing to do. That's been a number of years, and as far as I know, he's still a faithful gospel preacher. So I agree with what Sid says. You have to be concerned about that. But you also have to be willing to forgive. To forgive. All right, when we come down a little bit further, we get to a section which has to do with Timothy's report. And in verse 8 and following, we have Paul's prayer for the brethren. We can hope all day long that brethren do well. We can call them on the phone and say, hey, I'm thinking about you and I want you to do good. But we must be people of prayer for all of our people, and especially of those that we have some particular connection to. And if we know they're struggling with something, we need to be in prayer about it. Paul says it this way. Let's go to verse 9. What thanksgiving can we return to God for you? For all the joy that we feel for your sake before our God, as we pray most earnestly night and day, that we may see you face to face and supply what is lacking in your faith. What thanksgiving can we give to God? The report that Timothy brought was very positive. And Paul understood that he needed to thank God for the report. He needed to thank God for the good work that was continuing there. He needed to thank God for the activity and the soundness and the strength of the brethren there. This coming week is Thanksgiving. We're going to be talking a lot about Thanksgiving. But always remember, Thanksgiving occurs on days other than those we eat turkey on. Somebody many, many years ago decided it was a good idea to set aside a particular day nationally for Thanksgiving. That's probably something that would never happen today. But because it was done and because it is so much a part of American culture, and let's be honest, because a lot of people get the weekend off, I get that, Thanksgiving will probably never go away as a holiday. And as Christians, we ought to participate. We ought to be giving thanks on Thanksgiving. But we also ought to be giving thanks on the day before and the day after. And the day after that, and the week after that, and the month after that. Thanksgiving should be the hallmark of our lives. And I've said this before, I've never met anybody who said, Bryant, I think I pray enough. I've also never met anybody who said, Bryant, I think I've given enough thanks. Because we know better, don't we? We know better. Some of you remember a family that used to worship here. They moved back to be closer to family. Speed and Roberta Castorf. Interesting people. Loved them to death. Roberta was, I believe, she was a retired chemistry teacher, high school chemistry teacher. And she's a pretty tough old bird, okay? She's a lady told me one time, we all went out to eat at a seafood place, and I was going to get oysters on the half shell, love them. And she stood up in the midst of everybody. She said, Brian Evans, if you're going to eat them things, you sit over there in the corner and you face the corner, and I better not hear you slurping. Yes, ma'am, I'll order something else. And if you knew Roberta, you could kind of hear her saying that, okay? But the thing is, I was thankful for Roberta and gave thanks for her and the hard work that she did at Eastern Shore to help us in so many ways and in some of our different programs. We need to constantly be people of thanksgiving. I was going to tell you, though, I mentioned one time in a sermon that I wanted everybody in the coming week take a legal pad and write down every blessing you could think of. Big ones, little ones, minor, what some people might say were minor things. Just make a list. She came in the next week. Preacher, I'm tired of writing. She said, I started doing what you said to do, and she said, my hand is tired. She said, I never realized how much I had to be thankful for. And I think that was smart. I think she's right. She didn't know. None of us do until we stop and think about it. Paul was thankful for these people, praying for them earnestly night and day, that we may see you face to face and supply what may be lacking in your faith. Despite Timothy's report, he still wanted to see them because he loved them. And we know how it is when you have children who will go away to college, okay? There's that brief period of time when wow, we got the house back. And then you start thinking, I wonder if they're okay. I wonder how they're doing. And they come home and you're worried about them being on the road and stuff like that. Oh, how you want to see them face to face. It's not the same. It's not the same talking to them on the phone. That's the way Paul loved these people. Okay, any comments? Okay, I'm going to stop right there. We will wrap that up next week and move into chapter 4. Chapter 4 is where we begin to get into some of the discussion about the end of time. I don't know that we'll get there next week, but it won't be long. And please remember that next week we'll be meeting on Tuesday night and not on Wednesday night, okay? Because Wednesday everybody's busy getting ready for Thanksgiving. Some are going out of town, that sort of thing. So years ago we started just moving it to Tuesday. So we'll be doing that and doing the same thing at Christmas because Christmas Eve is on Wednesday. So we'll be backing up to Tuesday. So just want you to know that. Put that in your calendars. Thank you very much for your time. We'll take our break and the others will be in just a moment. Good evening, good to see everyone. Let me remind you right now before I forget, it's probably on my list here, but please remember that next Wednesday we will be meeting on Tuesday. We will not have Wednesday night services, we will be meeting on Tuesday, 7 o'clock. So please plan on being here for that. On Friday, the ladies' Bible study will be at 1 o'clock. Knowledge Seekers will be at 6:30 in the fellowship hall, and of course everyone is invited to come to that. Bring whatever finger foods and drinks you'd like for the knowledge seekers. On Sunday, Master Leader Song Leading will be at 4:14? 4:15? Come at 4:15 and you'll be 4:14 and you'll be early. I see some churches do that. They'll put the starting time. Have you ever seen that? The starting time of their services will be like at 9:04 or so. Is that because people can't get there? I don't know. But anyway, guys, just be here for last leader song. And then Bible Bowl practice will be at 5 p.m. 1 Peter is the book you need to be prepared to work on. The 2026 monthly service sign-up sheets are on the bulletin board. We need volunteers for really all of them: communion prep, building lockup, greeters, ushers, and transportation for the Rogers. Now, we're probably also going to need transportation next month, maybe even next week, for Cindy Hatcher. She's going back to her house, at least that's her plan, and so she'll need somebody to bring her for a week or so until the doctor cuts her loose on her driving. If you can help with any of that, please let us know. Building lockup is easy to do. If you don't have a key, we will get you a key, as well as the other things as well. Happy to have you involved. Please remember we're hosting a blood drive on Tuesday, December 2nd from 1 to 5:30. You can schedule on the app or on their website. Congregational Christmas party is going to be at 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 9th. At the 516 Event Center in Summerdale, 2 doors down from LA Barbecue on 59. Cost is $20 per person and can be paid on the app or give your money to Glenda. The sign-up sheet for that is on the bulletin board. Please remember that tomorrow is the funeral service for Maybelle Perry, 11 o'clock at Jubilee Cemetery on Highway 181. 11 o'clock for that, graveside, everything's graveside. Maybelle was insistent that there better not be a wake for her. And we respect that because she threatened me if I let them have one. And so please, if you can come, please do. And then we'll be coming back here at about 11:30 for a luncheon, primarily to feed the family, but all of you are invited as well. So we would love for you to come and see the family and encourage them. Yes. Okay. Okay. Linda could use a couple of ladies to kind of help set up tonight. Do you need tables moved or anything like that?
I don't think so. We just got to set it up and
Okay.
have it ready.
Okay, so we need to set up as much as we can tonight. So ladies, if you've got a minute, please follow Linda back to the fellowship hall and get everything done, and then we'll be finished. And then if there are a couple of ladies who are coming tomorrow, if you can help serve and set everything out and do what y'all know what needs to be done, just talk to Linda and make those arrangements. So I don't know how many to expect. I do know there are a number of cousins in the area who are going to be coming. So, and Michelle doesn't have any children. I don't think her brother has any children. I don't think Clay has any children. But there are tons of cousins. Maybelle had a very big family. She was much beloved by her family. So please come and help us with that. Okay, tonight our song leading is going to be by Luke and Jesse. Number 691, Farther Along. Please join with us as they lead us.
Thank you, Luke and Jesse. Have you ever been thankful for something that you don't have? Monday morning, I woke up, went to take a deep breath, and realized I couldn't get anything through my nose. Had a big old headache, felt awful. Wasn't too happy about that. Tuesday, I was feeling a little bit better, but I still wasn't good. I still couldn't breathe out of my nose. And you can still tell that I don't sound exactly normal, but it feels so good to breathe through my nose. I'm so thankful that I don't have that cold anymore. This is going to be a 2-part Wednesday night Devo. Next week, we're going to talk about being thankful for the things that we do have. Shocker, it's right before Thanksgiving. But there are many times in our life that we don't get the things that we want. Or we don't get things that we didn't want, and we should be grateful for what we don't have. And that's hard for us to imagine because we live in the most prosperous nation in the world. We live in a place where, if I want a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich with extra pickles, I can get that in about 5 minutes. But there are times that I need to be grateful for what I don't have. I'm grateful specifically today that I get to be here with you because I don't have that cold anymore. I'm reminded of the prophet Habakkuk, who at the very end of the book of Habakkuk has this prayer. And throughout the prayer, he's talking about how powerful God is. But he ends the prayer in kind of a weird way, being thankful to God even when he doesn't have anything. Habakkuk 3, starting in verse 17, though the fig tree may not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, though the labor of the olive may fail, and the fields yield no food, though the flock may be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength. He will make my feet like deer's feet. He will make me walk on my high hills. Oftentimes, when we don't have anything, we're blessed because that gives us a chance to truly lean on God. When we don't have something, maybe that we wish we had, we have a chance not to look at it as not having something, but as instead having the chance to lean fully on God. And that's going to be my encouragement to you for this week. Take time out of your week to thank God for what you don't have. To look at a situation where you're missing something that might seem important and take time to know that that means that you can rely on God. If we had everything we ever needed at all times, we would never have to look to God for help. But the truth is, even if we had everything we needed in this world, there's one thing that we can never do for ourselves. We could never pay that penalty for sin. So maybe this week, take some time when you feel the earthly weakness of not having something to look at it as a reminder of the greatest weakness you had in sin. And to know that just like God takes care of you in this world, He made a plan to take care of you for all of eternity. Tonight, if you've not taken advantage of that free gift, you can do so. Or if you have, but you need prayers to help you refocus your life, we're here for you tonight. If there's anything at all that we can do for you, won't you come forward while we stand and while we sing?
we have, the health that we have. Pray that you would help us to become grateful to you. Lord, thank you so much for keeping everyone in this life. Pray that you would be with them in